And for more on this, I want to bring in former Air Force intelligence officer and cyber intelligence expert, Travis Hawley. Travis, it's always good to see you. The internet is going crazy. What do we know so far? The impact, national security implications, tell us.
Yeah, as usual, there's plenty of conspiracies and beliefs out there about what is actually happening. But what we do know is around 12 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, reports started coming into the website Down Detector, which is a crowdsourced website where people can report any type of outages on any service really that exists. So what was really special about this, though, is seemingly the scale and the panic that ensued thereafter. People on all over the internet and social media, as you can see from this graph from Talkwalker, a social listening platform, it exploded. This caused mass panic, at least online, which is sort of understandable when you see what types of services were taken out. People were unable to reach 911, and then also people were unable to reach loved ones and connect to the internet for their work. So a lot of impacts here, and we can break down all of them from critical infrastructure to national security. But really what you saw here is also a digital panic, which seems to be more common nowadays.
There were speculations of solar flares, but there are people saying, well, if it was a solar flare, why did it take out telecommunications in particular? Wouldn't it take out other things
Yeah,
as well?
exactly. So honestly, if we were to create a spectrum of what is most likely and what is least likely to have happened, a solar flare and also what DeSantis said about EMPs would be on the very unlikely causes for this. And I'll just talk about the solar flare implication here. NASA did report two very large solar flares that happened in the last 24 hours. However, a solar flare wouldn't discriminate on which satellites and which type of communications it hit. So in this case, seeing that more specifically, AT&T has been impacted. Others seemingly have been impacted as well. Solar flare would not decide to target AT&T. It would be indiscriminate in the sense that it would affect all, if not some, of all types of satellites that are in orbit. So solar flare is actually possible, but highly unlikely in this case.
So do you think it was a cybersecurity attack? Because, the federal government is coming out and saying there was a press conference earlier, and they said basically, it doesn't appear to be a cybersecurity issue, but you're not ruling that out.
Absolutely not. First of all, that is a standard protocol statement to make in the beginning of any type of critical infrastructure outage, because we just actually can't really know this quickly. It might take weeks or months for incident responders in the cybersecurity realm to actually investigate what happened here. So definitely cannot rule it out. I think that's more of a public affairs type of statement to make, so we don't needlessly accuse or cause any type of other types of actions to happen based on that theory. But let me return to that spectrum of likelihood. So the least likely, of course, would have been the EMP and the solar flares. The most likely be one of two things. One would be some kind of cyber attack, and the second one might be some kind of actual just malfunction or type of configuration error or issue within their own IT infrastructure. So when it comes to a cyber attack, though, this could be fairly likely, but it's hard to know until we understand what the intent was here, right? So there's many different types of cyber attacks. The ones we tend to see are often economic based, so they can use ransomware so that they can exfiltrate or encrypt data so that they can get money in response for that attack. But there are things called distributed denial of service attacks, DDoS attacks, which are just there to actually take down a network. It's just to be disruptive and destructive. So that is very much still a possibility. But like I said, it's going to take days, weeks, maybe months to really understand what really happened here. So we need to wait and not necessarily assume that it is a nation state actor like China or Russia.
But let's say it was China, okay, because, FBI Director Christopher Wray, he warned about that. How prepared is the U.S., would you say?
That's
Is that a
not a
loaded?
great question. That's a tough one. I would say I would actually say not very prepared in many ways, and the reason for that is critical infrastructure, whether it is nuclear or water or telecommunications and many different other types. still run on older technologies in many senses. Some companies are more advanced, some are still have archaic technologies. And what that means is they're at their end of life cycle. These modems, these servers, these routers, these computers are not patched up and not ready to defend themselves. So it's a mixed bag. I'll be honest with you. It depends on the company, it depends on the infrastructure, it depends on the state. Honestly, it's all over the place in terms of who might be most prepared and who is not prepared.
What is your advice to people how to safeguard themselves? I know it's also a loaded question, but
Right.
if the water
Yeah,
goes out,
absolutely.
if, it is a big attack.
Right. I mean, look, we do live in an era now where cybersecurity is mainstream. We're starting to understand the implications. You don't need to be a cybersecurity expert. You just need to experience outages like this, where you can just use your imagination that if they were at a much larger scale and for a much longer period of time, how that might affect your livelihood. So certainly in terms of being prepared, there's things you can do. Maybe don't panic about it, but there's nothing wrong with having food and water in your home and having a plan, as they say, but also from a digital perspective, digital hygiene, making sure that you're really careful about the things you click and do online. But also, I would say having other modes of communication. So, in this sense, a lot of people were unable to communicate because they relied on their cell phone. So, I would have other forms of communication, ability to go use Wi Fi at a Starbucks or something. Find other ways and other apps that you can communicate in case of an emergency.
My parents, they have a phone, a landline. I don't. Do you? Do you have a landline at home?
Honestly, that's funny because I even remember when I was a teenager, my dad would joke about that. Like, one day when we're all digital,
There you
we're
go.
going to be thinking we really want to go back to hardwired.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, from a national security standpoint, even the military and other government organizations are in some ways rethinking that, of understanding that we need to have alternatives to the digital world and having some systems what we call air gapped, and also having some things hardwired, because you need these redundancies, as
You're
we
right.
can tell now. In one moment, things can change.
Yeah, going back to the basics. Cyber intelligence expert Travis Hawley, good to see you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.